At a time when the public was just starting to understand the importance of their natural surroundings, Dr. Patrick Redig recognized the importance of providing medical care to injured birds of prey. As his work progressed, not only did he develop the internationally recognized Raptor Center, he was instrumental in the restoration of peregrine falcons throughout the Midwest. During his youth, Dr. Redig developed a love for raptors. As he pursued his career in veterinary medicine, he used that passion to preserve and protect threatened birds of prey.
I've been interested in birds ever since I was a small child, and for reasons that I can't even begin to recall, or at this stage in the game, I really liked the birds of prey, the raptors, apart from just about any other kind of bird out there. And I have recollections of becoming knowledgeable and from that interested in falconry, probably from going back as far as the third or fourth grade. And it came about through reading and some. I couldn't even tell. I mean, I know along the way there were some television shows that talked about falconry a little bit, and I remember particularly there was one book that was in our classroom in the fourth grade about the falcon of Eric the Red. It was a fictional book of an account of a young Norse boy up in Vinland, in the Newfoundland area. I went back in the 12th, 13th century when the Norse people were there, about his experiences with the gyrfalcon. And it just captured my imagination.
During the 70s, the public began to grow an awareness for the environment and began focusing on preserving it. In 1970, for the first time, laws were beginning to protect the birds of prey as well as many other animals.
I think what's particularly important to understand is what was going on around us at the time. This was 1970. And in 1970, there were big movements going on in this country with what I refer to as the awakening of an environmental consciousness.
This awakening of an environmental consciousness captured everyone's attention when America celebrated Earth Day for the first time. On April 22, 1970, millions of Americans lined their streets to celebrate clean air and water. Even though the newfound support for the environment was an improvement, some damage had already been done.
At that time, peregrine falcons were gone, bald eagles were in very poor shape, and we had become aware of the ravages of the wholesale broadcasting of poisons in the environment, things like DDT, which 20 years previously had been heralded as a chemical control for insects that was going to basically save our crops and save us from diseases caused by insects and things like that. And we found out very quickly that it was nothing but an environmental disaster. And really what this represented, this was the first indication that where people started accepting the notion that the earth and the environment is not ours as humans to simply use for our own purposes any way we wanted to, without regard for the consequences and the impact that it has on other living species. And the fact that we need those species as part of our food chains and our web of life chains, and that mutually support each other.
In 1970, Dr. Patrick Redig and his professor, Dr. Gary Duke, decided to do something about the mess the raptors were in. When another veterinary student brought in 4 baby great horned owls, Dr. Duke sought out Dr. Redig to help care for and study them. Over time, Dr. Redig began to help more and more birds, most of which were able to return to the wild.
Official inception date, if you will, of July 1st, 1974. But to say it was a center at that point in time would be a stretch. And we went for the first several years, primarily those 4 or 5 years that I was in graduate school, just accumulating experience in working with birds and garnering support from the public and making something of a name for ourselves. But we didn't have a sense of a program that would extend over a period of time.
Although Dr. Redig started the program with no real expectation for a long-lasting center, it soon became one.
We had actually gotten to the point where we felt we had garnered a lot of public support. We were doing some well-recognized work in terms of research in medical care on birds of prey, and it really had advanced the science and the practice of that. And we also had gotten involved in some restoration work with peregrine falcons, and we decided to really go for it, if you will, in a big way.
In 1975, the Raptor Center received their first annual grant of $5,000. Since then, the Raptor Center has accomplished numerous feats which have revolutionized avian medicine, earning them $1.3 million in annual funding. Dr. Redig did not stop with the Raptor Center. He continued on to help restore peregrine falcons to their rightful place throughout the Midwest.
1962 to 1964, in that range there. Those years in there were the last recorded nesting events by wild peregrine falcons in Minnesota and the upper Mississippi River Valley in the North Shore of Lake Superior.
When DDT was widespread throughout America, it caused peregrine falcon eggs to become weak, resulting in the eggs breaking or being crushed.
And in fact, by 1971, there were no peregrine falcons left east of the Rocky Mountains, okay, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and south of the tree line, going up into northern Canada. So 3/4 of the North American continent was devoid of peregrine falcons. And so I think it was 1980 when I went up there to give my workshop. We got to talking about peregrines and peregrine falcons, and they had a problem that the Canadian Wildlife Service couldn't utilize all the falcons they were breeding. And I suggested that maybe we could work out a deal where we could send them down to Minnesota.
Dr. Redig launched the Midwest Peregrine Falcon Restoration Project in 1982. With the help of many falconers and the Nature Conservancy, peregrine falcons were raised and released at nesting spots throughout the Midwest. These peregrines that had been hatched in captivity and released into the wild began breeding and re-established the wild population. What started out in Dr. Redig's basement is now housed in its own building on the University of Minnesota campus.
We have 16 full-time employees, which includes veterinarians and veterinary people, technicians and support staff there, people in education, and then people in development and public outreach. I think another aspect, though, which is telling, is that we have over 300 volunteers, and that's just really an amazing thing.
In addition to taking care of numerous birds of prey, the Raptor Center has educated both the public and veterinary professionals.
And then beyond that, I've had a lot of students from all over the world that have been here. We've had over 300 students from close to, I think, about 30 different countries right now that have come through here. And so there's a global outreach aspect of the program, because all of these students go back to their home countries and continue the work.
Dr. Redig's legacy continues with the return of the peregrine falcons in the Midwest.
So now we have over 200 pairs nesting in an area that used to have about 50. And they're nesting on buildings and cities and bridges, as well as the cliffs that they used to nest on. And it was a good example of something that you can do and put a lot of people, a lot of resources together.
In the future, Dr. Redig wants to continue caring for injured raptors and raise public awareness and support for birds of prey.
There's two components to my vision. First of all, I think that the work that we've done till now has been really very effective in doing things like that directly and positively impact raptors, like the restoration of the peregrine falcon. We did similar work with bald eagles and ospreys, although not to the great extent that we had to do with peregrines. But any of those have been successful only because we've been able to work with others in the whole area of environmental education and bring about a change in the public attitude towards raptors and wildlife and the environment.
Dr. Redig has no plans to retire and will continue to care for raptors, educate veterinary professionals, and increase environmental awareness.